And we're live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Billy Musio and Bradley Stalder here for the Fantasy Football Fanalist. And tonight we have a very special guest. Tonight's guest began his fantasy career in 1993 as webmaster of TFLreport.com. He received one of the highest honors in the industry as the first ever Fantasy Football Writer of the Year by the Fantasy Sports Writers Association in 2005. He is currently senior editor of the Fantasy Sports Publications and one of the original Fantasy Football Diehards. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to my favorite podcaster in the industry, Mr. Bob Harris, host from SiriusXm Radio. Bob, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Billy, Bradley, thank you for having me. Very kind of you to ask me on.
Oh, we couldn't think of anyone else we'd have on. When we were messaging on Twitter and he said, hey, send me the details. When do you want to make it happen? Bradley made fun of me. I pretty much fangirled over it because I've been listening to SiriusXm for.
I did the same when I got the request. So there we have.
So we're excited to have you on. But tonight, before we get started here, we're going to review this week's practice reports and player injury designations leading into Sunday's Super Bowl 55 matchup between the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. Then we'll transition into prize pick slates and cover some of our favorite entries. But before we get kicked off, I want to take a few minutes to pick Bob's brain, get to know him, gain some insight from one of the best minds in the industry, learn his routines, his perspective, and his mindset when it comes to fantasy football. So, Bob, if you're okay, I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Go.
What is your current day job and fantasy football job?
They are both one and the same. This is it. I'm doing it right now. I'm talking to you guys. No, I work for Fantasy Sports Publications. We're mostly a publisher of magazines, do 5 magazines every year, except last year. It was unusual. You might be surprised to learn. But we did 2 last year, and it worked out okay. So we'll bump it back up again this year. But in general, we also have a website called Football Diehards, where I ply my trade on a daily basis. The NFL is a 365-day-a-year enterprise, and so are we. So as anyone in this business knows, you keep grinding away. So that's the full-time job. I'm also on SiriusXm Fantasy Sports Radio and NFL Radio at times. So I get to do that. In the season, it's about 6-7 days a week. Depends on. Last year was 6 days a week. So and now that it's off season, it's fewer days, but still plenty to keep me busy.
Awesome. So fantasy football is the career. And like a job, and that's serious. But when it comes to like favorite NFL team, like that's a different perspective. So do you have one, and do you have a favorite NFL player right now too?
Teams, I hate them all equally. It'd be like asking a dishwasher what their favorite plate is, the cleanest one, right? So kind of that's how it is. Whatever's the least complicated. Sometimes, some of these stories where you're reporting the endless, ongoing dramas. Right now, we're looking at the quarterback situation. So, writing a lot of, I feel like I'm in Cool Hand Luke. I'm digging the hole and then I'm filling it back in. And he said, no, he's not doing that. Yes, he is doing that. So Carson Wentz is the current flavor of the moment. Deshaun Watson will be an ongoing theme. So all the quarterbacks will. So plenty of that. So no, I don't like any teams, which makes it pretty easy. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. We didn't really have any teams in Arizona. All my friends came from other places. They all had their team. From wherever they came from. I had nothing, and then the Cardinals moved there. I felt like I still had nothing. So there was a point where I tried to have a team. It was in high school still, I guess, and the Seahawks and Buccaneers, came into the league in expansion. And so everyone said I had to have a team. So I flipped the coin. I got the Seahawks. So I guess, if you maybe say I had a team, that would be it. But I'm not really, no allegiance. The players, I just like all the great players. I like guys who work hard. It's hard to single anyone out over the course of time. I've had some guys, and a lot of them are players that you get a chance to meet and interact with. And I think, so of the current players, there's so many good ones. I know this is not a popular view, but you look at what like Tom Brady has done over the course of a career and the body of work and the effort that goes into that. And I think that's the things that I look at is that, a long-term commitment to excellence is not easy, right? It's an ongoing thing. And I admire the way he's done that, but there are plenty of other players. It'd be hard pressed for me to say, I don't like a player. I don't really do that. But if we go back over the course of time, some of the guys I've interacted with that I really have a soft spot for, whether it's LaTavian Tomlinson, who's just such a great guy, classy and thoughtful individual, Priest Holmes, Another guy similar to that, Sean Alexander, a really nice guy. I mean, there's been a long series. Steve Smith, one of the best interviews I've ever had. Just the intensity of the interview matched his intensity, I felt like, on the field. And it was just a really good time. And, and I think there's been players that I've interacted with where I kind of get done. I go, God, I wish I hadn't talked to that guy. And you kind of feel like maybe, that, but I think that's the case with anyone. So I think from, players that I love, I like them all. I mean, I just think it's so easy for us watching on Sundays to overlook what goes into playing professional sports, right? It's an everyday job. It's not like it used to be when, and nothing against the older guys, but it's a year-round thing, and the amount of effort and work that goes in is so amazing. And so I kind of like everybody. I know that's such a cop out. No.
It's funny.
It's almost like a teacher being asked, "Who's your favorite student?"
Right? That's exactly it. Or a parent asking who's their favorite kid. They probably have one. They just can't really say it.
So there's real quick before you just sparked the memory here. So I always talk to my wife. We say, who's your favorite kid? And like, oh, you don't have one. I say, okay, come on, honey. If you hear someone fall down the stairs, thump, 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 thump,
no.
And you hear who are you running for and who are you walking for? And and that's when I know if you have a favorite kid or not. So besides your own, do you listen to other podcasts? And if so, what are your top 3 favorite podcasts? I
don't listen to my own because I hate the sound of myself. So I don't listen to anything I do after I do it. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I knew you guys were going to ask this. So I was trying to come up with my list of my favorites, and it's really hard to come up with my favorites. And one of the things about that is you're going to leave people off that you really love. So I'm going to go with my favorite. Say I listen to a lot. I do have one clear-cut favorite, and he knows it, and I know it, and it's JJ Zachariason. I love the Late Round Pod, mostly because it's short, right? It's consumable. I just love the pace and the way he goes through stuff. I'm a big fan of JJ. I've had articles by him. Love his work. Love the way he thinks and everything. So, if we're looking, can we see who's on there?
I recognize a few of them. Yes.
I probably listen to the same ones everyone else does. There's some non-football, but mostly not. I love Marcus Grant. So, the Harris podcast. The Feast. I like the Established Throne. I love Adam Levitin. So, a lot of these, John Paulson. I'm a huge fan of John Paulson and just 4for4 in general. But I love all these guys, and I like to listen to tons of it. So when I'm exercising, doing things, I generally tend to have somebody talking in my ear, and it's always a pleasant experience.
So how did you get your start in the fantasy football industry, and how did you get to where you're at now?
So first of all, I just decided to do this. And basically I decided to do this because I started playing fantasy football in particular, like in 1986. And about a week later, I decided we don't have enough information to do this right. Right. We just did it. It was obvious. And I think as I played more and I got increasingly frustrated with, the lack of information, I just kept thinking, man, I'm not the only person who thinks this way. This is the funnest thing on earth. The only thing that would make it better is if I could actually play it well, and that would require some information. And so that's kind of what drove me in the direction of doing that. I was a little bit of a graphic designer. I had computers when nobody else did, and things that allowed me to kind of create, a paper product and put out. And I started doing it with just my league. And then I just kind of thought, man, maybe people would buy this. And so nobody would, but I started selling it anyway. And I make the same stupid joke every time, but I think if I do this another 50 years, I might break even. It's been a long slog, right? I've been doing this a business since 1993. Two things. It turns out I'm not a very good businessman. And I think it's only one thing, which is part of why I'm really not a good businessman. But unfortunately, I ran across a really good businessman named Nemo Cadlick, who kind of took that part of it off my hands and allowed me to do the part that I do, I think, reasonably well, or at least, competently enough to continue doing it for almost 30 years now. So that's kind of, how this has moved forward. I've had a lot of good ideas, and I think I'm pretty good at executing those ideas. Turning that into money was never my strength, and fortunately, I found someone who is better at it than I was.
That's yeah, it's finding Billy's been like the business side of it and has been really building, like challenging me on content too. And so like there's definitely like a give and take of just even us starting out as well. And like we just started this past year. And we're a new podcast. We started after I said, Billy, like I'm making projections. What do you think? And he's like, let's do it. How are we going to roll these out? Why don't we have a podcast? And then it started more iterations of what we wanted to do. But being a new podcast, like what's one piece of advice you would give to new podcasters, new people into the industry, content creators? What's something that what piece of advice would you give to us?
You're not going to fool anybody, right? I mean, and this is another sad cliche that I use over and over. We're selling ice to Eskimos. You're dealing with the best informed audience that I can imagine, right? Other than me with heavy metal music. So, but no, in all seriousness, I mean, your audience thinks that they should be doing your job, right? And by all rights, they probably can. The only thing keeping them from doing it is they're doing something else. And so you just have to be mindful of that. And I think the biggest part of that is you're not fooling anybody. Be honest with your audience. And when you don't know something, say, I don't know. Or when you're thinking something through, frame it that way. And I think they're very forgiving in that way as well, though, because for the very same reason, right? For the very same reason they're really hard on you, they'll be really easy on you. They've made stupid picks in drafts, right? They've missed on guys that they thought they were going to hit on for sure. And so all of these things or strategies and approaches. So all those things that, you feel like might be viewed as weaknesses aren't necessarily viewed as weaknesses when you're talking to a group of people that know what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think that's one of the things, I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm not telling anyone how to do it. I'm telling them how I do it. And I'm trying to do it in an entertaining and engaging way that I think that, will be helpful to them. They're going to be the ultimate deciders of that in the end. And if I'm not as successful as I'd like to be, obviously they're going to come listen to you or somebody else. I mean, there's no shortage of outlets out there. So I think that's the thing is just, treat your audience with the respect they deserve.
Yeah, we always say honesty is the best policy. And I'm the first one to raise my hand and say that I had about 20 shares of Corey Davis in Dynasty over the last few years and missed until really this year on a fifth year breakout.
Yep.
And so
there's something to be said for being too stupid to quit somebody, right?
Exactly. And Bradley knew I was never going to let him go. So it was
never. I sent him so many lowball offers. Like
I was broke back Ingram for like 5 years before it started paying off, right? Just couldn't quit him.
Yeah, it's a matter of time, and finally something has to hit. If you throw enough, expletive against the wall, eventually it'll stick.
But I do think one of the things is you have to explain the thought process, and I think more than being right or wrong about specific players, if you can share with your audience how you arrive and make your decisions and what goes into reaching your conclusions that you've reached. That's how you win people over, and your ability to engage with the audience and draw them in, whether it's through, being creative or entertaining or whatever, your approach is. At the end, it all boils down to, communicating your ideas clearly to them in a way that even when the ideas and the end result isn't exactly what you want it to be, they understand that the process mattered and that it's valid.
See, everyone. So what he's saying is Bradley and I, every time we made wrong picks on Price Picks, and we reviewed it every single week because we believed in transparency. And every week we would give projections on Price Picks or MKF or our players that were going to break out this week or whatever it was. And then we would review those projections every week on the following podcast and flat out say what we got wrong, what we got right, and why. And we would break down our reasoning, and we constantly said that it's the process and it's the mindset and how we get to that process that's good. That's the important piece. And sometimes it just doesn't play out that way.
That's exactly
right. And then doing
right.
reflection on the process. Yeah. Like, what did we take away? What mistake am I not going to make again?
Yeah. The entirety of life is making a process, and then making it better. Right. I mean, that's the whole goal. Every single day you figure out how to do something, then you do it a little better. And then the next day you do it a little better. And part of that process is having setbacks and struggling and going, oh, okay, here's where I was wrong, and understanding, admitting your flaws, telling people right up front. I mean, they notice. They already know, right? And so if you're the first one to throw it out there, it reflects well on you. and people get it, man. And look, it's not everyone. There's going to be those 7 trolls out there that, oh yeah, you're an idiot, right? Well, okay, yes, I'm an idiot, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to try and make this better, and I'm going to try and explain to you how I'm making it better.
Yeah, we're the idiots with the mic. So for right now, they have to listen.
right. And they do. But that won't stop them from trolling because look, I mean, that's part of this. This part of this as well, right? That's part of the feedback loop, whether we like all of it or not. I mean, that's part of how you learn and you get better is listening to all the critics, and some of them, maybe are a little nonsensical or a little over the top, I would say, but it doesn't mean there's not a kernel of truth to what they're saying. You should pay attention to all of them.
Correct. So how many leagues do you play in annually? And then what would you say is your greatest competitive edge versus other fantasy football players and colleagues in those leagues?
So number one, way too many. And I mean, I don't know if that's ever going to change. I've promised myself to cut back this season. I remember making this same promise every season and never cutting back. So we'll see. I'm getting into, Dynasty is one where you kind of, I mean, it is kind of a year-round thing. You got to keep it going. So I try not to do too many startups, he said, as he's doing a new startup right now. So I don't know. So it's generally been 25 plus. I think this is season I actually did cut it down to, leagues where I have to set lineups every week was about 25, and about 8 of those are Dynasty. So I'm hoping to cut back, but I mean, doing the magazines, especially like doing 5 magazines, well, we might have 2 leagues for each of those magazines. I'm kind of obligated to be in those. And then, I want people to come play in those leagues. So sometimes I have to reciprocate and play in those leagues. So, I mean, it makes it a challenge. And that's why I suck at fantasy football. I am a great drafter. I am not the best grinder of the waiver wire because the amount of time it would take me to do that. I'm just not, it's just not my strength. And so what my strengths are, and I don't know that this is much of an advantage as it used to be, but it's still an advantage. It's just being immersed daily in the NFL and what's going on in the NFL and what, just the minutia, the day-to-day machinations that are going on that maybe give you that little bit of an edge. But honestly, in industry drafts or the leagues that I'm playing in, that's not really an edge, right? I mean, it's I think your edge then is, hitting on players you think might hit, right? And I mean, we all have the guys, Corey Davis. I mean, this year my guy was Robbie Anderson. And the funny part was I said I would never draft him. I didn't say I would never draft him. I said I wanted to avoid players who were moving this year because of the unique circumstances, right? Or this past year. And yet there he was, like late in drafts. I'm going, how can I let this go? And so, that was a guy that came through for me. You have to hit on some of those guys. You have to hit on a fair number of those guys. And it's not only just a competitive business, but you're playing with competitive people who are in this business because they're competitive, right? I mean, so yeah, it's, I'm happy to come away with little bits of success. I think out of all the leagues I played in this year, I had 1 championship. And it's a hard league, man. It's Gary Davenport's death match IDP league. It's, like 32 teams and it's, full IDP, 50-man rosters, whatever, just ridiculousness. And so that was the only one I wanted. And man, some you come up short and you know why, you miss on guys. I have to draft really well and then hope those guys hold up really well. And that's kind of the thing. I'm not the first guy on the waiver wire every week.
So speaking of trolls, we have a troll question here for you from one of the listeners. And it's a little bit of jab of me over here, but do any other fantasy experts drink wine during their shows?
I have seen this before. You are not the first one I've seen do this. I myself do not drink the alcohol because much like you wouldn't like Bruce Banner when he's angry, you wouldn't like me when I drink. So, I've seen this before though. This is not a totally new thing to me.
Awesome.
All right. So Bob, can you walk us through what is during the regular season? What does a fantasy football week look like for you? How many games do you watch? And like when Sunday football ends, what do you do?
I sleep. So I probably should pull this up too. If you look at my Fitbit information, I average about 3.5 hours a night of sleep.
Oh my gosh.
From I think the 1st of August through the end of December. And so Sunday night I actually sleep. I get 8 or 9 hours of sleep. So that would be the big thing. And I do watch all the games. whether it's on Game Pass or whatever, I sit around like everyone else. I watch Red Zone and have games on at the same time if I want to, hone in on something specific. But I love sitting around just watching Red Zone. I do the pregame show on Sirius with Jeff Manns, so Sunday morning I'm up like at 4 a.m. I'm a bizarrely religious workout fanatic, so I don't miss any exercise. So that means a little extra time, a little less sleep, a little more exercise. But we do the pregame show, and then I work standing up. I'm standing up now. I work standing up. I don't sit down ever until Sunday. And then I plop my ass down on the couch. I stare at the television boxes. I watch the games. And when the games are over, I pass the hell out.
That's awesome.
And I do watch the condensed versions of the game while I'm working then over the next few days. Just to make sure I'm not missing something. I'm doing that while I'm working. It's not like I'm sitting here doing film study. I'm not, that's not really what I'm up to. But I do think there's something to be said for watching entire games and kind of understanding how the flow of the game works. And, is something that, a statistical, finish, is that an anomaly, or is there some explanation for it? So I think there's a lot of value in doing that.
Yeah. It's like similar, like, was it a Tracy McSorley 40-yard touchdown at the end of the game that propped up his stats, or
right.
was he targeted throughout the entire game?
Right.
So besides your own, what is your go-to fantasy football site?
So I don't really go. I don't have a lot of time, right? So, I do the news as well as analysis on my site during the season. And so I'm doing, there are days when I might do 70 news updates, right? So I'm not going out and reading a ton of stuff. I do read people, and there are certain writers that I really enjoy, certain analysts that I pay a lot of attention to, and again, I could list them all, but I'd leave somebody off and hurt their feelings. So I'll keep it to a few. But Mike Clay is someone who I pay a lot of attention to. And he would be the one that I probably read. But there are a lot of others. And I feel bad that I'm leaving people off and not crediting them as I should, or if I'm not crediting them as I should. So, but I do get a little time to read people, and I am out studying things. And as you're out looking for information and pulling, things in to go along with the work and go along with your analysis, there are people that I do pay attention to. So, some of the guys at NFL do a great job. I'm a big fan of Marcus Grant, big fans of some of the kids at Yahoo, Matt Harmon, Liz Loza, friends of mine who do really fantastic work. And, again, I'm just leaving so many people out. I feel miserable that I'm leaving people out because the list is so long. And I know, I think we all kind of have our favorites. And so, I don't want to make anyone feel like their work isn't great, because everyone's work that I see, I go, wow, that's really good. I just don't have time to look at all of it.
So is there a favorite article that you've written, or a piece that you've written, or maybe a magazine, that you've that you're most proud of? Is there something on your wall maybe that you have framed, or
the Ask Me About My Cats sign is great. The Sports Writing Hall of Fame thing is pretty cool too. So, like of the things that I've written, there's been so many over the course of time. If one was to stand out, it would be an article I did on the history, the start of fantasy football with Bill Winkenbaugh. I think it was something that a lot of people didn't know about at the time, and kind of how fantasy football started back in right at around 1960, and these guys all kind of associated with the Oakland Raiders, or whether they were front office people or media people who covered the team, kind of started it. And, there's a lot of documentation in that article. I had all the documentation. I talked to all the people who were still alive that were doing it. And it was fascinating. And I think the thing that fascinated me the most about it, and the thing that turned into the focal point of the article was even 40 years later, how much we haven't changed, right? As fantasy players, right? The smack talking, the heated, back and forth between players, the strategies, all the things. It was all there, and the rule book that I had from them was outstanding, and they did a great job. And they probably drafted more guys that maybe were dead. I think there was one of those drafted early on in one of the first couple drafts. But, there wasn't, the information wasn't as prevalent and available to them as it is now. And I think that was the only difference.
So how would you describe your fantasy football philosophy?
Value. I'm cheap. I am cheap. I'm looking to maximize value, right? I'm a value-based drafter. I think it's funny because you talk about, people you've worked with, et cetera. I remember when Joe Bryant, now Football Guys, came to me with his first value-based drafting article. And, it was kind of based on some baseball things. And I'm looking at him going, wow, I do that. Just didn't really know I did that, right? But once he, kind of coalesced it and put it down on paper, I'm going, yeah, this is the thing. So I'm still basically a value-based drafter, go more heavily into positions of scarcity and, wait on quarterback, all those things. So, but mostly I'm cheap and I'm looking to get something for nothing.
So we've got to talk about dynasty or redraft during the season. You manage your leagues, and it's every fantasy manager. They always remember their first or their worst trade. The first bad trade or the most impactful. They remember it. Everyone has that. What's yours?
I always remember the ones that went well. I probably purposely forget the ones that didn't. I think the worst trade that's really standing out in my mind right now, because it's very recent, is one I didn't make. And somewhere Matthew Berry is laughing his ass off about it still. We worked on a deal for like a year, just back and forth, and Dwayne Haskins was something he was after, and I was just wanting too much. And I ended up, we ended up agreeing to just, maybe revisit this another time. And here I am with the Steelers' fifth string quarterback still on this roster and nothing in return. So that one stands out to me as one that I could have maybe been a little more reasonable on.
At least he's on a roster now.
Yes.
So these next few questions are fill in the blank. Blank is the best fantasy football manager I've ever played against.
So this is kind of an easy one. Just the most intense and focused. Everyone I play against is really good. But my serious co-host over the last 10 years, Mike Dempsey, is both the most, I think he's just the most viciously competitive. He is relentless in his pursuit of winning, and nothing else will suit him. And it's like playing a Terminator, right? It's just, he's coming and there's nothing you're going to do about it. Like when I say, I'm not the first one on the waiver wire, he is. No matter what. He is out there working, 3 weeks in advance, whatever. So Dempsey, and he wins a lot, and he's very good fantasy football player, very good at radio, very sharp mind, and just relentlessly competitive. It's almost horrifying.
It's funny you say that. Now that you said that, I can actually hear the competitiveness in his voice when he's talking on SiriusXm Radio, and so that comes at no surprise, just based upon how he talks.
Yeah, and that's like the tip of the iceberg. Trust me.
All right, so blank is the best article you've ever read, and why?
I mentioned that value-based drafting one that Joe Bryant wrote. It was kind of a revelatory piece, right? So, I would say, that's on there, but the list of those, again, is so long. Again, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. This is editor of 5 magazines. Every year I'm out looking. Literally, I go out hunting. This time of year, I'm out hunting for articles, right? And I think of the list of people and the award winners. Gary Davenport writes for me every year. Every article he writes is amazing. He hasn't written a bad article in his life. I don't know if we went back to kindergarten, but he is creative and thoughtful and strategic, all those things. So, I can think of like Matt Waldman when it comes to, talking rookies. He has been writing for me, I think, since 1996. I've been writing a rookie article, and some of the, I think the thing about this business that amazes me and continues to impress me endlessly is the number of super smart people who get into it, right? You think of now, God, the list is so, I think of just recent guys, Scott Barrett, who, by the way, runs a great league that I'm in, the one I'm in that I mentioned with Matthew Berry. We have a great time. It's a dynasty league. Marcus Grant, I've mentioned, Liz Loza, John Paulson, Graham Barfield, Armando Marsal, Harmon, Ali Fontana, Brandon Marianne Lee, Curtis Patrick is just a sharp mind. Man, he writes great stuff. He does great work. And this goes back even to the middle 90s. Ron Jaworski used to write an article for us. Mel Kiper used to write rookie articles for us back before he got as big as he was. So I would think, there's been so many articles that would be impossible for me to single one out. But I think what this does for me just gives me the sense and gives me a better understanding probably than a lot of people have of how many super smart people do this, right? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you got lawyers and literal data scientists, Josh Hermsmeyer, a literal scientist jumping into the fray. I mean, these guys are, and ladies, I mean, and that's part of it, man. More women are getting involved. And so I feel it's like great to have this platform where I can expose other people to some of these great writers. And it's been one of the, I think that's maybe my favorite part of the job is like, I find something, wow, look at what I get to show everybody. Because number one, it makes me look smart because they're smart. Right. And I think that's what you're looking for. But honestly, there are so many smart people out there doing this right now. And I mean, I'm again, doing a disservice to so many who I have not mentioned. And I apologize because, man, that's the thing. I hate leaving people out because they don't deserve to be left out. Nobody deserves to be left out. So many people doing great work, and I love you all.
So it's funny, talk about the smart people and their day jobs in this industry. And we interviewed Abib Agbatoba. I always butcher that last name. Sorry, Abib. And he is the 2-time back-to-back champion over at FFPC for the FBG champion. And he is a skull-based surgeon. And so it just super bright fellow in here, just drafting championship rosters year in and year out.
High stakes guys, and gals that I've been dealing with over the course of time. And I mean, some of them I've had the good fortune of working pretty closely with. Jules McLean. I think she's with Fantasy Points now, but she's been a great high stakes player over the course of time. Brad Cruz. I mean, this guy is just like, he calls his team the Fantasy Assassins. He's not kidding.
I'm in a league with him.
You're right. It's not inaccurate, right? I mean, so many of these great players, Nelson Seuss out there. I mean, just can't, again, I'm leaving so many names off because I'm trying to do this off the cuff, but I mean, though, that's an entire universe unto itself. Right. And so we could talk about the DFS aspect, right? I mean, that's another entire universe where I know tons of great players there as well. So, there is no shortage of really just brilliant minds out here doing this and thinking next level and putting it down and sharing that, sharing how they get their success with other people.
Yeah, it's awesome seeing the different ways in which fantasy players can be successful in various platforms. It's been awesome to just increase that exposure and really great to hear about it. All right, last question, and then we'll get into our Super Bowl preview. The last question is, blank is my fantasy football nemesis, and I will do anything in my power to beat him or her, even if it means losing myself.
It would be that nemesis. But I've lost myself 1,000 times just because, it's like the, we always joke about it on the air too. It's the Hannibal Lecter school of what you covet, what you see every day, right? So I see him all the time, and he's always in my ear chirping at me. But I'm in a lot of leagues, right? And so there are leagues that I take way more seriously than other leagues, and so Barrett's league is one of those. The Kings Classics leagues, where you get relegated if you don't do well. Nobody wants to go to sit at a different table. You want to stay with wherever you're at, and so I think leagues like that are pretty tough. I finally, Jake Seeley has been trying to get me into flex leagues, and it's really hard because of the timing to travel when he does those. So this year, since they were online, I was able to get in the flex league. I want to do really well in that one. So there's some that I put a priority on over others. I'm in a league with Mike Clay that I love doing well in, and that I don't very often. It's a really tough league, a really deep league. Barrett's league, as I mentioned, is one that, the smack talk is pretty endless, and it's a really tough group of players. So yeah, I think it's more, leagues than people, right? So, I'm just trying to, I want to be super competitive in some leagues more than other leagues.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all of that. Like, I've learned a lot just even in our 34 minutes and us picking your brain. It's been so great having you answer those questions, giving your insight on those. We're going to shift gears here into the Super Bowl preview and begin with some injuries. So first injury that we're going to look at is Eric Fisher, left tackle for Kansas City. So of course he's ruled out. He'll miss the Super Bowl because of the Achilles injury, torn Achilles. He's been vital in that pass protection. That offensive line has held up for Patrick Mahomes, and the run blocking has been there too. Kansas City is 27-1 with him in the lineup over the last 2 seasons. So that's a recipe for success. But when he's been out, they've only been 4-4 in those 8 games. So 500, they've been human. I know it's a smaller sample size, but we can talk about the impact that not having Eric Fisher at left tackle can be.
Yeah, I think in general, I was talking to someone just even right before this, Sergeant Jerry Blair. Hi, Jerry. But a great player in his own right as well. A lot of people know him out there, Los Angeles police officer. But but I think and the thing we were talking about is if there. I mean, I like the Chiefs in this game. I see something similar to Week 12. But if you were looking for reasons not to, I think the offensive line is the reason not to think the same, right? Or to think that it might be different, or that something could be, noticeably different. And beyond him, I mean, they've had some other attrition as well over the course of the season. So I think that's the thing I would be most worried about is Fisher and the offensive line.
The other Kansas City player ruled out, Willie Gay, linebacker, rookie, knee injury, will not play after undergoing surgery to fix a torn meniscus. And he didn't play in any of the postseason games. They've been playing mostly without him during the postseason. So Gay has been an impact linebacker, but not to the level of, they've still made it.
Yeah, they figured it out. I think, and I think that's the key. This is for, and maybe they figured out with Fisher. They've shuffled that offensive line around. I mean, I don't think, you can put lipstick on that pig and make it a lot better. But on the defensive side, I think that is a little bit of an advantage that they haven't been playing with them, and they've still been faring reasonably well.
So those are the only 2 players ruled out for the game that we're aware of. But questionable, Lev Bell, he did practice today, but he has missed some practices in the past week and a half. It's just my opinion. I don't think he's that much involved. I think he's at least 3rd on the depth chart, even without a knee injury.
They actually took him off today, so he's cleared now. So the final one, they left him as questionable on the bye week, but they took him off today. I'm kind of with you either way. I don't think that it matters. I think I think he's kind of. I can remember when he showed up in Kansas City, and a lot of people were very excited about it. I was not. And not that it turned out that it was great news for Clyde Edwards-Helaire or anything worked out really well for anyone else, but I didn't have high expectations for him. And I think they should only be lowered. I mean, Daryl Williams seems to be the guy that's of much greater interest to me, along with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and maybe of more interest than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So yeah, Bell's kind of a non-factor for me.
Billy, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think pretty much when he left Pittsburgh, it was a death sentence for his career. I mean, he had an outstanding offensive line. They had, such great repertoire between the team, what they were doing. And he took that year off, and we've talked about it all year. Taking that year off killed his career. And then he goes to the Jets, and at that point, he chose money over playing fantasy or playing football and being successful. And we've seen other players go down this road, and it's kind of been the same trajectory. So
to be fair, that's not the worst decision for him.
No, I agree. For him, it's great. For
us, not so good.
For us, not so good. And for football, in terms of a legacy, maybe not so much.
I agree.
Definitely left some stank on there. Jets stank. Sammy Watkins, he got into full practice today. He had missed practices previously. He's always like the dark horse to come out of nowhere and put up unexpected points, but you can't really bank on it. And with having missed a lot of playoff games, there's just not a lot of trust that even if he's fully healthy,
yeah, I think it's been like a month since we've really had a good look at him, and I don't, but I will say, in this week's, if you're playing DFS, I mean, and you want to win the big money, you're going to have to go with lineups that don't, that not everyone is. So I'm going to have lineups with every single guy in them to some degree, and so he will be in some. But that's the only reason why you'd play him, is you're trying to differentiate or kind of find some unique combination that somebody else doesn't have. And even then, you're not going to find that unique a combination, people. I'm sorry.
No, it's a dart throw. And you said it. He hasn't played a month. His week 16, he had 2 targets was the last time he played. So I'm not expecting anything from him. And I'm looking elsewhere in dart throws. But like you said, there's only so many places you can look.
Yeah, it's a shallow pool.
We've got two defensive backs for the Chiefs on the injury report, Rashad Fenton and L'Jarius Sneed. Sneed is one of my favorite players, rookies. He just seems like every game he's in, he makes an impact play somewhere on the field. But him having the concussion, he did get a full practice in, same as Fenton today. They seem to be good to go.
Yeah, no injury designations for them. So I would expect status quo, usual, whatever their roles are, they're going to be able to play and play them reasonably well. I mean, look, we're at that point where, it's pretty safe to say nobody feels 100%, right? It's been a long season. So, and they might feel slightly less than other guys, but they'll get the job done.
Cameron Breit, there's been a lot of chatter in the last few days of his back injury cropping up. He does seem good to go. Listed as questionable. He didn't practice today per Adam Schefter. So even though he's expected to play, it's Rob Gronkowski there as well in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, this kind of just increases my interest to whatever it was in Gronk, right? I mean, and I don't know how great it was, but I mean, again, there's going to be lineups. I'll probably have Breit in some lineups. I thought it was interesting. They pulled him out of practice yesterday because it tightened up, held him out today. Schefter saying that he will play. And the expectation, I think he's one of those guys, as long as he's active, he'll probably be in enough lineups to, and he's, again, like Billy said, we're throwing a lot of darts and there just aren't that many darts to throw. So he will clearly be one of them if he's active.
The last player that's questionable, Antonio Brown. He's been nursing an injury, knee injury during the playoffs. Didn't practice last week, got a limited practice Wednesday, was full practice. He seems ready to go. The way Antonio Brown has just slowly increased his involvement in the offense gives me more optimism. Yeah,
I'm kind of with you. Again, if so in the world where you're looking at all the top threats on each team, there's really one guy. It's a one-man funnel in Kansas City at wideout, at least. There are other guys you can play, but I consider them dart tosses as well. And I think you look at the Tampa Bay side, you've got Godwin, Evans, and then, everyone else is a little bit of a crapshoot. Brown is less of a crapshoot than anyone else, it seems like.
Yeah, at what point are they going to say, you know what, McCole Hardman's actually talented, and we're going to stop playing this Sammy Watkins game, and we're going
DeMarcus Robinson game.
We're going to get show, kids. Come on.
Yeah. I feel like McCole Hardman has deserved a bigger role than what he's been playing in currently. And he's been electric at times. And we've seen that with, his returns and also just what he can do off a jet sweep or dump off. And I'd really like to see him a little bit more active in games here and see what he's really capable of doing.
Look, I think, a lot of these guys are capable of doing something, including the aforementioned Byron Pringle, right? Tyreek Hill's, give him more looks, everybody. So I don't know. I think all these guys are pretty reasonable dart throws. Again, if I'm saying Brown is like the top of that heap, certainly Hardman is right up there with him.
And before we finish the injury news, just a quick 1, 2, 3 here. Levante David and Antoine Winfield and Jordan Whitehead are all ruled in, which is great because they were the Bucs' second, third, and fourth leading tacklers on the season. So fantastic news for the Bucs to have all those tacklers in there.
Even if they're not 100%.
Correct.
They're going to play, and the Bucs D is, at least that front seven is a force to be reckoned with here.
That's a great thing, and they'll do fine.
All right, Billy, it's that time.
Yeah, and if you're missing the fantasy season, everybody, and you can't wait until next year, then Prize Picks is just for you. And Prize Picks is the most simple fantasy game on the market. You pick 2, 3, or 4 players. Simply pick the over or the under on their projected fantasy points, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. The beauty about Prize Picks is Prize Picks has no sharks, optimizers, or mass multi-entries. It's just you versus the projections. And Prize Picks has a slick, easy-to-use mobile app with a 4.8 star rating inside the App Store with rave reviews. And lastly, entries are simple. They can be made in less than 60 seconds, but this is not the best part. We've said it week in and week out. The best thing yet is Prize Picks is matching every one of our listeners' deposits up to $100. Simply use promo code FFF for your 100% deposit match and place your first entry today. So for those of you, I do know a few of you who have listened who actually told me, hey, I finally deposited for the Super Bowl and I'm making the picks, but I want to wait to see what Mr. Bob Harris has to say about your guys' picks so far, because I want to make sure that these are locks. And those were quotes from listeners.
There's a slight problem here. I am congenitally incapable of ever taking the under. So, and the people that I see really having a lot of success at this are the ones, at least the ones I know, take the under a lot or pick a lot of unders and do really well at it. Yes, I'm talking to you, Matt Rust. So, I'm probably going to pan every pick that is an under and root on every over. So
that's a good philosophy. It's just fun to score more points, right?
Right. It's the fantasy way.
It is. And so my first entry for the Super Bowl Sunday is Chris Godwin. Prize picks over under on receiving yards is 75.5. And I'm taking the over. So that's for you, Bob.
You.
I do expect it to be a high scoring game. Vegas total is 56.5. So they imply it as well. Godwin has been the favorite target for Tampa Bay and Tom Brady here as of late, averaging 88 yards a game with 4.8 receptions over the past 5 weeks. Also, AB, he's in now, but we don't know how 100% he is and what his involvement's going to be. Breit's out, or not out, but Breit's also having that back injury here and he's fighting it. So I think that we're going to see a little bit more Chris Godwin this game, and I expect this total to be driven up here. So I'm taking the over here on 75.5 yards.
Reasonable.
That's all Billy needs to hear.
Yeah, look, I'm hammering all the overs, but this one actually seems like it's possible, even if I'm trying to take a realistic approach to all of them.
Well, Billy, Bob is going to be happy with this one too, because I'm on the flip side for Kansas City and it's Tyreek Hill. We're not talking about receiving yards, but just overall fantasy points, and that's a new feature of Prize Picks that they've added. Not just overall fantasy points, but you can also pick certain lines for receiving yards, passing yards, rushing yards as well. But Tyreek Hill, I'm going with fantasy points. They have him at 21, the over-under. I'm taking the over here as well. And look, he nearly had 100 fantasy points the last time they played against.
Well, they've set the sights a little low.
Just a little lower than 100. It wasn't quite 100, but it was for the hyperbole's sake, it was one of the greatest fantasy performances of all time. And no, 13 for 269 and 3 on 15 targets isn't going to be the replicated output, but 7 for 90 and 1. I mean, I'd take the over on that. That seems like a floor play against the Bucs defense that has struggled against the pass this year. It's looked very human at times. And we look at the over under for the game. If the over under is 56.5 or whatever, and we expect the Chiefs to win, we're expecting 4+ touchdowns. Give me Tyreek Hill having at least one of them. It'll be the Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce game along with Patrick Mahomes. I think that's a solid stack. So Tyreek Hill over 21.
21 playoff targets so far. He will be heavily used.
Just because you said it was going to be the Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Now it's going to be the Brian Pringle and Sammy Watkins show.
Sorry.
Stop it.
I want to be Kelce and Hill.
Stop it.
Little Pringles sprinkled in.
So my second entry here is Leonard Fournette. Prize picks over under on rushing yards is 48.5. I'm taking the over again. Fournette has been the favorite back over the course of the postseason, averaging 16 carries a game with 70.33 yards. And the Chiefs have allowed the 12th most fantasy points to opposing running backs through the 2020 season, giving up 101 rushing yards a game. My only fear here is KC does get ahead early and the Bucs maybe abandon the run, but I am still liking the 48.5 line, and I'm smashing the over here for Leonard Fournette.
I like him as a receiver too in this game, or just that backfield in general. We'll see. I'm leaning towards Fournette. Is also Vegas also leaning towards Fournette, and also leaning towards him as a receiver. So I like the total yardage on him better than the rushing yardage, but I don't think this is the worst play.
Well, Bob, I hate to disappoint you, but you're going to get an under here with me. The second player for my Prize Picks, Daryl Williams, he has Prize Picks has him as 9 fantasy points, only 9. I'm taking the under. Look, even Clyde Edwards-Helaire's line of 8, I think, is generous. But I'll focus on Williams here, he's been the most fantasy relevant. You mentioned that earlier. He seems to be getting more of the volume. I've preached all season, though, if it's a running back against Tampa Bay, the Bucs have just shut them down. The Washington running backs were held to 36 rushing yards. They held Alvin Kamara to 85 rushing yards. The Packers running backs combined were at 67 rushing yards. So let's say Williams in a split backfield is going to get 45 rushing yards, 2 catches for 15 yards. He needs that touchdown to go over. And with how good the Tampa Bay run defense, I'm not trusting that they're going to give Daryl Williams the ball. They're going to have Patrick Mahomes throw it.
This hurts me, the under. So, look, I think, look, we talked about it. The offensive line, if there is a concern for Kansas City, that would be it. And that would have a great impact on the rushing attack. Daryl Williams could still scoring a touchdown, though. I'm sorry.
Vita Vea's back.
You heard it here first. Fantasy football analyst Bob Harris said it. Daryl Williams touchdown.
Yeah, Vea's good. It's a very tough front seven. Devin White was a guy who, when he carried me far in a couple of IDP leagues.
Oh, yes.
And he was an amazing player and a lot of energy. Barrett. They have some really good guys. So yeah, I think this one's not like totally crazy. Again, congenitally incapable of taking the under.
So my last pick here I have is Sammy Watkins. Over under receptions is 3.5. I'm taking the under. We said earlier, Watkins hasn't played since week 16, where he went 2 for 14 on 4 targets. He's still battling the calf injury. Yes, he's practiced, but with McCall Hardman playing as well as he has, with Pringle being sprinkled in, I just don't expect a full workload here for Sammy Watkins, and I'm taking the under on 3.5 receptions.
Pringle's actually been starting.
Yes.
But I'll just say, if I was ever going to take it under, this might be it. Also, this is the kind of game that Sammy Watkins shows up.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's true. It's
8 for 190 and 3, right?
Would not be totally shocking.
All right. So my last pick, Bob, this is a chance for redemption for me. Okay. Chance for redemption. Tom Brady, over under. This was a newly added. Billy actually gave me a heads up that this is a newly added rushing line on Prize Picks. This was not up earlier this week.
No, it was added just like yesterday.
The over under 0 rushing yards for Tom Brady. So I have to thank
Vegas
Brett.
has it like half a yard, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Brady did have 12 games this regular season with less than 1 rushing yard, and 2 more games this postseason with negative rushing yards. Now, many of those negative rushing yard scenarios came in Tampa Bay with kneel downs. Okay. I don't anticipate that being the case against Kansas City. The Chiefs also allowed 279 rushing yards and the league's second highest rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks with 7 during the regular season. Brady has 32 rushing touchdowns in his career, including the playoffs. And I think that's an easy over at 0
yards.
Yeah, 0 yards. I'm taking the over here. I think game script, I think matchup, and I think Brady, if they get to the 1 yard line and they're choosing someone to run it in, like Brady's going to choose for that legacy pick. Like it's both stats and narrative that I think just gives that over on. All we need is 1 rushing yard. So
I think, as my friend Nick Bakay would say, push.
Yeah,
this one's close.
It is going to be very close. If this was a half, I think I'm taking the under. But at 0, it actually changes things, even though it's only half a yard. Well, yeah, I was actually thinking for sure I was going to take the Tom Brady over all week, and then I did a lot more research on it, and I said, you know what, the off chance of them going into halftime and kneeling, maybe possibly.
Yeah, downs are that's been the bugaboo for him, and the touchdown runs or the runs that he does have are always very short. Whether it's just to sneak for trying to get a first down, whatever. They usually do that from very, very short.
Yeah, so I actually took the under on this line here, Bradley. I ended up changing my mind just because of that extra half yard. It swayed me.
Well, if you remember last year, Patrick Mahomes, I think the line was that like 35 rushing yards or something like that. And he went into that last drive at like over 40. And then he knelt down 3 times and it went to the under. So, I mean, that game script really does play a factor.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game you're playing there, Bradley.
So before we end the show, I'd like to say thank you again for joining us, Bob. It truly was an honor and a privilege to have you on. Would you like to do any shout outs or closing comments here? Super Bowl prediction?
Shout out to you guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Nice to meet both of you, and look forward to having you back again. And you can listen to me on the radio and on the podcast and at the Football Diehards website.
Awesome. How about a Super Bowl prediction before we finish up?
I'm taking the Chiefs, I'm going to probably say 38-35 just because, again, I like points and I have no reason not to pick for a bunch of them. But I think if they end up losing, it's going to be because of that offensive line issues. And so I still think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to give a slight edge to the Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes.
Bradley, what's your prediction?
Yeah, I think it's the Chiefs as well. I think not quite 70 points, but I am taking the over. I am taking the over at 56.5. So
fair enough.
I took the over 56.5, and I'm going to say 31-28. So I'm a little closer there between the two of you guys. But I do think Chiefs win this. The 3.5 is interesting on the spread for the game, but I think it could easily be beaten. But I'm going to take I'll take Tampa to cover on the 3.5 because I think it's going to be a 3-point game.
All right.
Well, thank you for watching and listening to our Super Bowl preview podcast with Bob Harris from SiriusXm Radio. Make sure to follow him at Football Diehard on Twitter. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at FF Fanalists, at FF Musio, at FF Stalder, or on Facebook at Fantasy Football Fanalists. Please subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels at FF Fanalists, or simply go to our website and you can find every single thing I just mentioned. It's much easier at fffanalists.com, where you can find articles, rankings, DFS content, and more. And we have continued to load up rankings in there. We now have our IDP rankings for Dynasty, and we have started our top 25 for 2021 for rankings moving into the Dynasty leagues for next year. Make sure to tune in next Friday. That is 2/12/21 at 5 p.m. for our FFPC High Stakes Hour podcast with Eric Bachman from FFPC. Good luck to any of you this week in your DFS lineups. We will see you all next week, and good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.